30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon to my viewers in Europe and Africa. Good morning still to my viewers in the Western Hemisphere, at least most of you. And good very early morning to any viewers in the Pacific Rim. And welcome to the Angry Astronaut, a very, very big event taking place today, at least as far as space flight and rocket nuts, rocket enthusiasts are concerned. I wasn't sure if I was going to actually cover this, given the fact that I wasn't going to be present for the actual launch in Cape Canaveral, but I decided, yeah, this is a big event. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this, and I appreciate you folks tuning in. We've got over 100 people checking in. So where are you checking in today from, please? I'd love to talk to you folks and see where everybody is checking in from for this historic event in the history of space flight, the end of an era, the end of the era of expendable launchers. This is slowly winding down, and Delta IV Heavy is definitely a representative of that era. But at the same time, a lot of big achievements with this rocket. And since it's been in service for nearly 20 years, we certainly can't hold that against it. We've got Mulheim on Ruhr, 4 Marks, UK, Virginia, Key West, Manchester, Olympia, Washington, and Roswell. We've also got the Philippines. Hello, thank you very much for checking in. We've got Birmingham, East Devon, another UK, and we got Florida. Hello, thank you very much. And Cincinnati, really appreciate it. Hi, Kiz, thanks so much for the compliment. So let's see, we got Glenwood, Georgia, the Retro Roman Doomsday and Simulation Channel. Well, thanks very much for tuning in. We've got Yorkshire and, of course, ASN also in Yorkshire, my awesome producer. We've got Italy, Romania, Minnesota, French Canuckistan, South Carolina, my old home state, or a state that I called home for 25 years. And I'll be coming back soon, by the way, to see my son perform at Clemson, Scotland, North Carolina, Poland, Cheshire Plains. Hello, Florida. Hello, North Macedonia. Hello, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And hello, Somerset. Thank you very much for checking in today. And in a little less than a half an hour, ULA will be going live, and we will have coverage of this Delta IV Heavy launch. So just a lot of folks may not be completely aware of just how big of a deal this is, because the Delta IV Heavy is not a small rocket in terms of its capabilities. It actually, as far as its payload capacity is concerned, it is the third most powerful rocket on the planet in terms of operational rockets. Obviously, Starship has massive payload capabilities in theory, but is not a mature operational system yet. The only rockets on the planet that have more payload capability than Delta IV Heavy are Falcon Heavy and SLS. That's it. And if you talk about volume payload volume capabilities. Delta IV Heavy's fairing is huge, substantially bigger than Falcon Heavy's current fairing anyway, the one that it's operational with. So really, in terms of combination of payload and volume, Delta IV Heavy eclipses just about everything except for SLS. So that's pretty big capability. That's impressive. Even Vulcan Centaur does not quite have the same payload capabilities that that Delta IV Heavy has. Hello, East Devon. Hello, Canberra, Australia. Yeah, it is interesting, Hyde, that they're making this retirement, but at the same time, Vulcan Centaur can do 99% of the missions that Delta IV Heavy can do. At least in theory, its fairing size is actually a bit bigger, and its payload capacity is nearly the same. It's very, very close to being the same thing, and it costs a lot less money to launch a Vulcan Centaur, even in expendable mode, versus the Delta IV Heavy. The Delta IV Heavy is an expendable 3-core rocket. That's an expensive rocket to launch if you're not reusing anything. However, as far as the engine side of things are concerned, it actually has only three engines, one on each of these boosters, and these are massive engines. You would think that I would know just from memory as to what those engines are called. They run off of hydrogen and oxygen. In just a moment, it's the RS-68A. There we go. The RS-68A actually has substantially more thrust than even the Raptor 3, which of course isn't even in service yet, and a lot more than the Raptor 2. So we're talking a very, very powerful engine, which is one of the reasons why you can launch such colossal payloads with only 3 engines. I mean, that's all this thing really has. And yet it has this impressive capability. So yeah, you're losing 3 boosters, but at the same time, you're only losing 3 engines. By way of comparison, if you were to use a Falcon Heavy in expendable mode, which sometimes happens, and that's 27 engines flushed down the drain. So there are certain things that make this rocket pretty impressive. One of the reasons that it's so expensive, aside from the fact that it's expendable, is the fact that it just hasn't had very many launches over its history. And you have to amortize the expense of any rocket over the course of the development costs into its launch history. And if you only have 16 total launches, that's not a whole lot of launches to divide up, the expense. And so as a result, it jacks up the price substantially, makes it even more. Of course, this rocket would still be expensive regardless, because it's expendable. An expendable 3-core rocket would still cost a hell of a lot of money. But nevertheless, it looks like we have a launch pushed. Just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and get some updates for you real quick while we're at it. Let's see what ULA is saying. Yeah, countdown exactly 2 hours away from liftoff. Green status board for Delta IV Heavy. Weather remains red. Fuel loading wrapping up. So we have fuel loading is, at least they're doing that. But it does seem that we may have some weather issues that could complicate the matter. Oh, how about this? We have a few trivia questions that they've been throwing out. Of course, they don't have the answers for them. But who knows? Somebody here might actually know. The first Delta rockets were 90 feet in height and produced 150,000 pounds of thrust. What is the height and thrust of today's Delta IV Heavy? Well, I mean, come on, that's the easiest thing in the world to cheat on here. Let's see. Well, you guys could go ahead and crunch the numbers as much as you want to. The thrust of the main stage is 710,000 pounds, and each additional stage is also 710,000 pounds. So that's 2,130,000 pounds worth of thrust. And then in terms of its height, well, that's not the boosters. The total height of the vehicle is 72 meters, 236 feet. So there you go. There's your answers. But man, talk about something that's easy to cheat on with the existence of the internet these days. But yes, indeed. We have a rocket that's way, way bigger than the original Deltas of old. This is a rocket that has evolved considerably over time, and yet now it's done. As of assuming that this launch actually happens today, assuming that this launch goes off, this will be the end of the launch history for the Delta series completely. We have, of course, ULA replacing all of their rockets with Vulcan Centaur. Vulcan Centaur is the one-size-fits-all rocket that is going to be accommodating all of ULA's future payloads. And it's a decent rocket to do that. The price points on Vulcan Centaur are pretty affordable. We're talking about $100 million per launch, very comparable to Falcon Heavy, and with substantial payload capabilities out to geosynchronous orbit and to interplanetary destinations, and especially to the moon. And those are the sorts of things that really give it an edge for the types of customers that ULA is currently trying to pursue. Now, if we come to a time to where ULA gets gobbled up by Blue Origin, things will probably change radically in terms of what the focus is for this particular company. And I'll tell you, I will stick to my guns on this until I have a lot of evidence to prove otherwise. I think it's a bad day for the future of competitive spaceflight if and when Blue Origin takes over this. And yes, indeed, Anton, you're right. Blue Origin is indeed looking to buy ULA. That seems to be, and once again, this hasn't been formally announced, but it's been confirmed in a variety of different sources at this point. Once again, I don't see a motivation for Blue Origin to make this purchase except to eliminate a competitor. I think that's their only motivation. New Glenn does everything pretty much that Vulcan Centaur does. It may have a smaller payload when we're talking about geosynchronous orbital missions and that sort of thing. But really, it's a very similar rocket in many respects. It has a heavier lifting capability to low Earth orbit and less payload out to geosynchronous orbit, at least as far as we know. But it's really similar. And it's reusable. So why would you keep Vulcan Centaur in service? And it's not just that. It's also all of the really intriguing things that ULA is planning to do with Vulcan Centaur, including the Centaur upper stage being used in a reusable configuration as a space tug or as a refueling depot. There's a lot of different applications for the advanced Centaur 5 upper stage that could really be handy for a wide variety of different types of missions. And in my opinion, Blue Origin isn't going to try to keep that going at all because they've got their own advanced upper stage program for New Glenn going on right now. Why duplicate the same work? There's no way they're going to do that. There's no way they're going to spend the many, many billions of dollars that it would require in order to keep both of those programs going simultaneously, side by side. There is one motivation and only one for Blue Origin to make this purchase, and that is to wipe out a competitor. At least on the short run, they might use Vulcan Centaur to grab some customers. But, after that, they're just not going to have a use for it. And that's a lot of people in spaceflight losing their jobs. There are many, many people working right now for ULA who are involved in this significantly ramped up production schedule for Vulcan Centaur. Tori Bruno releases information about this on a regular basis. He shows these new boosters and these new Centaur upper stages being built in large numbers right now in Alabama. And even in Texas, to some degree, in just outside of Boca Chica, just outside of Brownsville, you've got a very large manufacturing facility for ULA, and all of these are going to be closed down. So we got 65% of our viewers saying that it's going to be missed, as opposed to 34% saying outdated. So yeah, we've got a bunch of ULA fans watching, I think, right now. And by the way, tagged in the description of this video, got some merchandise, perhaps even for some of you ULA fans out there, the Team Vulcan shirt that I put together a while ago, and it was actually created. The design was created by one of our team members, the awesome Darth Rust. And we got that, and who knows, there may be some SLS fans amongst the ULA fans who are watching, and we've got a shirt for those as well, SLS One Tank to the Moon. And then for Starship fans amongst you, well, we've got some of that as well. Team Starship, size matters. So all that has been tagged in this video if you want to check that out. Gotta love orange rockets, says 1-2. Well, like I say, time for waste to stop. ULA is a huge fiscal waste. Those working for ULA will transition to alternatives. Brad, I disagree. And the reason I disagree is because ULA is working very hard on innovation. I mean, if they were just doing the same thing that they've been doing all along and, counting on their allies in Congress, the lobbyists in Congress to get them contracts and that sort of thing, then I would totally agree with you. But ULA is working very hard on a wide variety of different innovative projects right now. And they're working hard on being competitive. And we need more competition. We don't just need a future where either SpaceX is the one dominant player, or it's SpaceX and Blue Origin, the two billionaire-owned companies being the two dominant players. I really think that the future of spaceflight needs to be more complex, needs to be more multifaceted than Jeff Bezos versus Elon Musk. I really think it needs to be more than that. And it's companies like ULA that make it more multifaceted than that. New Vulcan, yes. SLS days are numbers. I agree with that totally, Michael. SLS was an outdated rocket before it was even introduced. I think it has some limited applications for now, until we know that Starship is going to be an operational and viable rocket. I think that we still need SLS as a moon rocket, but I think that time is going to be a very limited time frame indeed. It's not going to be too long before SLS will be completely outdated. Will there be a Delta V? I doubt it. Andrew. I think the closest that we're going to come to the Delta IV Heavy that exists now is a triple core Vulcan Centaur. Tori Bruno has talked extensively about that. The triple core Vulcan Centaur or Vulcan Heavy, I think would be a very impressive rocket, and also could be very competitive as long as we have reusability for the engines. As long as smart reusability is introduced to that type of rocket to where you can save those BE4 engines, I think then the of triple core Vulcan could be very competitive indeed. For those of you who don't know what this is all about, smart reusability is the engines are packed in with a heat shield, an inflatable heat shield, similar to the lofted. Once the booster is completely burned up all of its fuel, the engines are ejected, flip over, and with the inflatable heat shield turned down, obviously, and then they re-enter the atmosphere, splash down, and they're buoyant. The heat shield is buoyant, keeps the engines out of the water to a great degree anyway, and they can be retrieved. So if we had a triple core Vulcan, then yeah, you could retrieve all 6 BE4s and use them again. BE4, at least in theory, is supposed to be a reusable engine. So yeah, that could definitely work. The engines represent usually about 70% of the cost of the booster, so that would substantially reduce expenses. And at the same time, unlike the SpaceX model of reusability, this allows you to completely burn all of the fuel in the booster, achieving a higher orbit and also heavier payloads. If you can burn all the fuel in the booster and you don't have to keep any in reserve to land the booster, that makes a difference. So there are certain advantages to that type of reusability. Of course, the obvious drawback is you're not saving the booster, the entire booster, you're just saving the engines. So in any event, it remains to be seen. I've seen a lot of the prototypes. I've seen the prototypes of the heat shields that are going to be used for smart reusability. They were on display at Space Symposium. And by the way, now that I've mentioned that, let me go ahead and say what I'm going to have to say in most videos at this point. I have an invitation to attend Space Symposium as an accredited journalist in Colorado Springs next month. This is the biggest space-related convention in the United States. I attended it last year. I'm going to get an opportunity to attend again as an accredited journalist, which means I get to go for free. Most other people have to pay anywhere from $500 to $800 to go. I get to go for nothing. The only expense is a plane ticket. And I would rather not spend some of the money that I have ferreted away for going to Starship, which is a commitment that I made for money that I raised the last time I was talking about this stuff. If you'd like to support that, if you'd like to see me go to Space Symposium, and by the way, it's attended by all the big players, all the big companies. It can either be done, you just check the description, Patreon, PayPal, etc. Those are usually the best ways to do it. And I would certainly appreciate that. Gives me an opportunity, by the way, to interview some of the biggest power players in spaceflight today, including folks like ULA, Sierra Space, Rocket Lab. All these folks are going to be there. I mean, anybody you can think of that's a big player in spaceflight, they are all at Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. And this is, like I say, one of the most affordable things I could possibly attend, simply because I'm from Colorado Springs. That's where I was born, so I can stay with my dad. So really the only expense is the plane ticket. We're talking maybe $400 total. So in any event, but that's all I'm going to say in regards to that. Trying to raise money for that particular endeavor. In the meantime, let's get back on topic. ULA uses the same BE4 engines as Blue Origin, actually removes the revenue stream for Blue Origin. Yeah, for now, Vulcan is a proven tech. New Glenn is like Starship, as of yet unproven for orbital flight. It is a good point. And I think that if Blue Origin buys ULA, they will use Vulcan for a while. But for a very short while, a few years, 2-3 years, maybe something like that. And then it'll be game over for Vulcan. And I really think that Vulcan Centaur and all of the technologies being developed in conjunction with Vulcan Centaur really has a very bright future. So and I think it'll be a wasted opportunity if they get gobbled up. The minimum Patreon, there's a top minimum Patreon is $3. That's it. And it's all in the description, by the way. And yeah, $3 a month, and you get early release content, exclusive release content. You're a member of the Discord community. And in addition to that, once a week, if you want to talk to me, if you regard that as being a benefit, which I think is a dubious benefit at best, but if you want to participate in a Discord conversation with me every Sunday, I talk to the viewers. Naked Gardener, thank you so much. Really appreciate your support on that. Thank you so much. Like I said, you guys have been doing a lot to support this channel up to this point. My expectations here are not huge. I'm just putting it out there. You know, I've been given this opportunity. I would like to go. All right. And boy, Naked Gardener, that was actually your first super chat ever on a live stream. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I am honored. Let's check to see what the status is with ULA. What do we got going on? So far, nothing really has changed. There was a delay in the launch. We are approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes, 34 minutes or so away from launch time at this point. Yeah, so, and it's going to be, originally the intention, guys, was to have me come on about a half hour before ULA's feed went live, and then they pushed that out. So we're talking an hour approximately before the ULA feed will go live. In the meantime, I am happy to answer any questions and to talk about ULA Delta IV. By the way, in terms of, if any of you are unfamiliar with Delta IV Heavy's missions, that's an interesting topic as well, because really there haven't been very many launches for Delta IV Heavy. This will be the 16th launch of the rocket. Just 16 launches. That's it. And then the rocket is going to be retired. Far, far less than the Atlas series. So why is this? Well, it's because the Delta IV Heavy is an expensive rocket to launch, and it really only has a couple of purposes. Number one is to deliver heavy payloads out to geosynchronous orbit, which is exactly what it's doing today, sending out a highly classified reconnaissance satellite for NROL. So that's, that's purpose number one. Purpose number two are interplanetary missions. It's only done one of these, unfortunately, and that's the Parker Solar Probe, which is one of the most amazing missions in the history of NASA. The amount of information that this probe has discovered about the solar wind, and information that's confirmed about the sun as well, and also just the sheer velocity of the Parker Solar Probe, because it's been using the sun's gravitational pull to propel it in a variety of different slingshot maneuvers. Given how close it is to the sun, it has traveled faster than any other man-made object ever. And then again, this is not necessarily because of a unique capability of the probe, but rather making use of the sun's gravity, given how close the probe is to the sun. Of course, this probe requires a unique collection of heat shields and just a completely unique configuration in order to keep it operational in such a very, very hostile region of the solar system. So it's set a wide variety of records, achieved an incredible number of milestones. And once again, this has been launched, and this has been launched by the Delta IV Heavy. So that's a pretty damn big accomplishment for this rocket. Now, another thing that a lot of people may not be aware of is the fact that the Orion, the spacecraft that's going to be heading to the moon, well, it already has orbited the moon once, but will be carrying human passengers the next time. That particular spacecraft was flown for the first time with Delta IV Heavy. The Delta IV Heavy was one of the few rockets, especially back in 2014, capable of that. Daniel, thank you so much for the $10 support. Really appreciate it. Do I plan to do an episode on the use of metallic hydrogen as a fuel? Now that you mentioned it, yeah, that sounds very interesting indeed. Thank you so much. Octaoxygen as its oxidizer. Let's go ahead and make a note of that, because yeah, that's a unique episode, and I really think that it could be very interesting indeed. Alan, thank you for the £2. Why is ULA up for sale in the first place? Because the founding corporations, the corporations that created ULA in the first place, they no longer want the company. They're no longer interested in managing it, so they're selling it to somebody else. And they're going to make themselves very, very rich in the process, and the shareholders very, very rich in the process. And they're going to victimize a lot of talented workers in the process. Duke Nukem, $50. Wow, thank you so much. That blows my mind. Really, really appreciate it. And yes, well, I'd be shocked if any of my viewers agree with everything that I say. I mean, I'm a strongly opinionated person, and I've got a lot of controversial stands on a wide variety of topics. So I'd be pretty shocked, actually, if any of my viewers completely agree with everything that I have to say on this channel. That's for sure. Go ahead, please. All right, so a super Orion nuclear detonation rocket. And when we're talking about this type of Orion, it's important that we don't confuse it with the Artemis Orion, as I understand the question. The original concept of Orion was to use fission explosions, small hydrogen bombs, and to use the kinetic energy generated by these blasts applied to a big pressure plate, and a series of explosions, one after another, a stuttering series of explosions, basically, pushes a vehicle like that up to as fast as 10% of the speed of light. This vehicle was never really looked at all that seriously because it violates the nuclear test ban treaty for outer space. However, that treaty has now come to an end. And as Carl Sagan said about the subject, it is the most productive and useful application for nuclear weapons I can think of. But yeah, I think it would be very, very positive, a very positive development indeed. And the Orion is not necessarily a vehicle that would be used for interstellar purposes. The Orion could also theoretically be used for interplanetary flight, very, very rapid interplanetary flight. I mean, we're talking very possible if we're talking a 1G acceleration, then 1G deceleration to Mars all the way. You could get to Mars in as little as 5-6 days with an Orion. You could get to Jupiter in a couple of weeks if with a constant 1G acceleration. And you could achieve a constant 1G acceleration with this type of system with nuclear bombs, essentially providing the propulsion. Once again, we're talking a very expensive rocket. We're talking a difficult rocket to build. We're talking about a dangerous rocket, of course, because you need a lot of fissionable material, a lot of nuclear bombs in order to make this thing go. But at the same time, we've had the technology to build something like this for decades. We just never have. And that is a bit disappointing, I'll tell you. That is a bit disappointing. Don't know if the rocket will launch today. Super windy in Titusville, according to Henry. Yeah, we could be in trouble. Do I have plans to go into space myself? Asked Andrew. Probably not. I mean, if an opportunity comes available, say on the on the Virgin Galactic, one of these newer Virgin Galactic ships coming out that apparently are going to have a more affordable price, assuming that that actually comes, it actually happens. Yeah, maybe. But in terms of an orbital flight for days and days, my health ain't great. I would really have to, my health would have to improve. I'd have to lose a lot of weight. There's just a lot of things I would need to do, I think, in order to get into space for a lengthy period of time. However, if Bill Shatner can go up into suborbital flight for 10 minutes or something and come back, if it were affordable, yeah, I would love to do that. I think that would be a hell. That'd be a hell of an experience. 12 miles an hour wind, apparently, from what we're getting in Titusville. Let's go ahead and check to see if we have an update. ULA has yet to provide any further updates for what's going on with their current launch. We are theoretically, let's go ahead and check this just to be sure. We are theoretically about 1 hour and 25 minutes, maybe closer to an hour and 20 minutes away from launching. Possibly about 45 minutes away or so before ULA goes live. Originally, I was planning on going live about a half an hour prior to ULA going live, so you wouldn't have to sit here watching just me talk forever. But ULA delayed the launch. So here I am talking a bit longer. When do I think SpaceX will build a tower in Vandenberg to catch ships coming in from orbit? Do I think the FAA will let a ship come in and land for a while? Yeah, Nano, that's a very good question. I think that SpaceX is going to have to demonstrate that they have very good and thorough control of Starship during the re-entry process before they're going to allow a capture maneuver. Vandenberg would be a dangerous place to allow a capture in some ways, because it's a military base, but at the same time, there's a lot of other sensitive stuff in that region. Maybe the better solution, in theory anyway, would be to do the capture, the landing and capture at Boca Chica. But of course, that means that the booster is going to have to fly over we're talking the orbiter at this point. The orbiter would have to fly over Texas and such. If we're just talking the booster, I would say that that's going to happen relatively soon. But at Vandenberg, I don't know, because I think SpaceX is going to check to see just how reliable and practical the capture method is, before they start building new versions of it. I really think that there's still a question as to whether or not this whole capture system is going to work, or if we're going to have to put landing legs back on the booster. John, thank you so much for the tenor. Really, really appreciate the coffee tip. Means a lot to me indeed. But in terms of Starship itself landing, that's going to be a very big issue. I think it's going to be a little while before the FAA is going to be comfortable enough with Starship's development and the degree to which it can be controlled during the re-entry process before they're going to allow it to re-enter over populated areas, because it is going to have to re-enter over New Mexico, Arizona, or Mexico itself. But I would say more probably it would make more sense to have it re-enter over the United States rather than over a foreign country. And you want to be sure that that rocket is re-entering safely and under strict control before you're going to allow it to land at any facility that's going to involve an overland re-entry trajectory. So we got some complications ahead, but at the same time, I'm totally confident that SpaceX will eventually solve these problems. And I want to be totally clear about that at all times, regardless of what hurdles, what barriers, what challenges I say SpaceX is going to have with Starship. I am 100% confident that they will solve all of those problems. They've got some of the best engineers on the planet working for them. I am totally confident that they will eventually work them out. The thing of it is, though, how quickly will they work them out? That's the big question. Will they work them out quickly enough to meet the Artemis 3 timetable? Those are the main questions that I've been asking when I talk about these sorts of things. Why SLS and not Delta IV Heavy for payload and crew missions? BG Rocketry, to answer your question on that, Delta IV Heavy is only capable of delivering a fully loaded Orion into orbit or to slightly higher than low Earth orbit configurations. It doesn't have the payload capability to put Orion all the way out into lunar orbit. Now, it has been suggested, it was suggested at another time, that Delta IV Heavy could put Orion up in one launch and maybe the ICPS plus the service module in another launch. Or, in other words, let's break Orion down into two components and it mate them together essentially and send them out to the moon that way with a couple of Delta IV Heavies. But unfortunately, it wasn't regarded as being easy enough to do that. Also, technically, Falcon Heavy theoretically could deliver Orion plus ICPS all the way out to the moon, just barely, maybe. But once again, that's really, really on the edge of its maximum capabilities, and NASA decided that they didn't want to play any games with that either. Oh, thanks for answering with all the Pioneers 10, 11, Voyagers 1 and 2, Junior, all of which are nuclear-powered spacecraft. Andrew, good question. Here's the difference. All of these vehicles that you've mentioned, Voyagers and the Horizons, that sort of thing, they are nuclear powered, but that power comes from the heat generated by nuclear isotope deterioration, which means that those engines last forever. The power source, lasts as long as the half-life of the nuclear isotope. However, they are not powered by nuclear reactions. They're not powered by fission, and they're not powered by fusion. They are instead powered by the deterioration of the isotope, which is very, very different from a nuclear weapon. Now, it is, of course, technically nuclear powered, and there are nuclear materials, fissionable materials being sent out with these probes. But at the same time, the thing that allows them to get around the treaty is they are not actually operating off of fission. They are instead operating off of the deterioration of the isotope. So that's why those probes have been allowed to fly, and why the test ban treaty does not apply to them. All right, let's see here. Once again, guys, I really appreciate how so many of you have tuned in, are hanging in here with me. Once again, let's go ahead and check the status of ULA. Let's see what they're saying, if they have any updates. Nothing for the last 23 minutes, unfortunately. The good news is that means they haven't scrubbed yet. Anton Nim, thank you so much for the additional details that you threw in there. Thanks very much. It's always good to have more information on what we're explaining on these things. By the way, though, I'm a big fan of that type of nuclear power, or any nuclear power, when it comes to spacecraft. Solar power systems really do have lots of drawbacks, and we have found that to be the case over and over again lately, especially with these lunar landers. Lunar landers with a nuclear isotope power source will last for years, even in the lunar night. But with a solar power system, they just don't make it. It's kind of sad. So, yeah, it'd be lovely to see a change with that. Once again, guys, thanks for tuning in. Please like and please subscribe. Don't forget all that. I want to thank also all the people you see at the top left of your screen who have been supporting me through Super Chats, or any of you folks who are supporting me on Patreon or on PayPal. You can do that in the description. Right now, that's going to fund my trip to Colorado Springs, where I'm going to be attending Space Symposium. This is actually the least expensive trip that I've ever had to take, or at least I'm going to be taking this year, simply because I'm from Colorado Springs. I'm going to be staying with my dad, so I don't have any rental car expenses, no hotel expenses. All I have to get is the plane ticket. And as an accredited journalist for Space Symposium, I don't have to pay the $500 admission fee or $800 admission fee or whatever it is that's just about everybody else has to pay, which is, again, I'm so grateful to Space Symposium to extending me this invitation. They are Space Foundation in Colorado Springs are awesome people. So this and there's going to be every major power player you can think of in spaceflight, from SpaceX to ULA to Sierra Space. All of those guys are going to be there. And as a matter of fact, I have got an interview in the process of being scheduled with Sierra Space, where I'm going to give you the latest details on Dream Chaser. Thomas Ray, thank you so much. Oh my God. Thomas, please keep your funds for yourself and for what you're dealing with right now. I'm so sorry. I've got so many viewers who are struggling with cancer right now. It's just a horrendously hideous and insidious disease that affects so many people. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I talk about space medicine. Space medicine is such an important and innovative new field of science that we are making breakthroughs all the time in microgravity. And the reason for that is you can develop different types of chemical compounds in a microgravity environment. It's easier to combine these elements together into new types of pharmaceuticals without having to worry about gravity mucking up the entire process. And it's one of the reasons why I've been a big advocate for the British government to step in and provide some funding for a UK exclusive mission to the International Space Station with 4 UK astronauts, because one of the main things that they're going to be working on, some of the main experiments they'll be taking up there, are going to be in regards to space-based pharmaceuticals, especially for cancer treatment. Cancer is a disease that affects the British population in a huge way. 1 out of every 4 British citizens develops cancer at some point in their lives. It's a horrendous thing indeed. So in any event, yeah, let's hope that, because right now the UK Space Agency, the only way that they got this thing approved was to say that no taxpayer money was going to be used for it. It was all going to be based on private investment. This is the only space agency, just to be clear, that's had this requirement. Go ahead, producer. Okay, we just had a request. Thanks very much, producer. I missed that. Saying apparently there's a child watching. How do we express this in more terms for the layman, shall we say, terms for kids? Well, today we have a satellite going up, a military satellite, a reconnaissance satellite. It's top secret. We don't know a whole lot about it. But this type of rocket, the Delta IV Heavy, that's lifting it up today, this type of rocket carries a lot of these types of satellites. That is its main job for the most part, is to carry up these types of satellites. These reconnaissance satellites keep an eye on what's going on here on Earth and watch for bad guys, whether those bad guys be terrorists or any other enemies to not only to the United States, but to United States allies as well. The rocket that's carrying it up is called the Delta IV Heavy, and this is the last time that this type of rocket is going to fly. This is a very big and powerful rocket, and it has only flown a total of 15 times. This will be the 16th time that this type of rocket has flown, but it is the third most powerful rocket on the planet in terms of how much stuff it can take up to space. There are only two other rockets that can carry more, and that is the SpaceX Falcon Heavy and the SLS from Boeing and NASA. So this rocket has some amazing capabilities that a lot of other rockets don't, and it's kind of sad that this is the last time it's going to fly, but there are new rockets that are going to replace it that are less expensive and can still do most of what Delta IV Heavy can do. And this new rocket is called the Vulcan Centaur, at least from ULA, from the company that makes this rocket. Their new rocket is called Vulcan Centaur. One exciting thing that you're going to see, assuming we have a launch today, you're going to see it's going to look like the rocket is catching fire. It's a very spectacular moment. And the reason that happens is the rocket is powered by a lot of hydrogen, a very flammable substance. And there is excess hydrogen, extra hydrogen that flows through the engines right when they're about to launch it. And it is ignited. Well, just a little bit of it, really not a lot of hydrogen, but enough of it climbing up the outside of the rocket that's going to be ignited. So it's going to look like I say, that the rocket is catching fire. It isn't, not in the traditional sense anyway, but it's going to be really spectacular. And it's one of the reasons why this rocket is called the most metal of rockets, is because of just how amazing that looks at the moment when it's lifting off. So get ready. Assuming this happens today, let's hope it does. It's going to be a great, great moment. All right, Andrew, let's see. Could we use Starship in an expendable configuration to launch both an Orion and an Apollo M on the same launch vehicle? No. Well, I mean, it all depends on how you look at it, but Starships, if you're talking about refueling it, then yes, probably so. You could probably pull something like that off. Without refueling, no, you cannot. But yes, if you're talking about, if it's carrying Orion and a landing, a small little lander of some kind, Starship's fairing is more than big enough to accommodate both of these vehicles. So yeah, I could definitely do it. The question is NASA going to be comfortable enough in letting astronauts ride Starship all the way from Earth to the moon? Probably not for a while. Let's see. But yes, good point, Carl. Starship cannot get a large payload higher than low Earth orbit unless it's refueled. That's the big thing. But an expendable Starship, of course, if Starship's expendable, presumably the tankers refueling it would be expendable as well. That would make the whole mission very expensive indeed. Maybe not as much as SLS, but still pretty expensive. All right, let's check again with ULA's status. Boy, I'll tell you, they haven't said anything new for the last 33 minutes. That means that they should be going live here pretty soon. They're only so we have 36 minutes before they're supposed to go live, in an hour and 6 minutes away from launch currently. That is the current situation. So fingers crossed. Let's hope that we get a launch today, because it's gonna be a good one. And the last of these kinds of launches we are ever going to see, which is a sad thing indeed. You guys give me for just 1 minute. I'm gonna go ahead and cut away for a second, and make myself some more coffee. Keep my momentum up here, and I will be right back. Hello, folks. Back quickly, as promised, to have some nice piping hot coffee here for myself again. For those of you who know me pretty well, you know that I drink a lot of coffee. There's a question. Yeah, I really need to get myself a coffee sponsor. I think that'd be a good thing. There was a question that was thrown out in terms of why does the Delta IV Heavy not have a hydrogen burn-off system, so it doesn't set fire to itself. The hydrogen actually serves a purpose of cooling the engines down right prior to ignition. These engines deliver an enormous amount of thrust and have a colossal amount of heat, even more than most engines. And they generate more thrust than even a Raptor 3 and considerably more than a Raptor 2. So that being the case, then right prior to ignition, this hydrogen it kind of flows through the engine in order to cool it down, and then some of the excess hydrogen escapes during that process right prior to ignition. It is sort of a unique process. We really don't see that happen much with other rockets, but at the same time, it works. And given the fact that you don't have to recover and reuse the boosters, it's not that big of a deal. If you had to reuse the boosters, then yeah, you might want to try something else. I'm really gonna miss the Delta IV Heavy. Yeah, Vulcan Centaur will be worthy successor. Are there different versions of the Vulcan Centaur? Yes, however, all of those differences are pretty much currently connected simply in the number of solid rocket boosters that it has, anywhere from 2 to 6. But that's the only current differences. However, there is a proposed Vulcan Centaur Heavy, a 3-core Vulcan Centaur that's on the books right now. Tori Bruno actually has a model of one in his office. So obviously ULA has an idea to make essentially a Vulcan Centaur Heavy, a successor to the Delta IV. Unfortunately, it won't have a lot of the same traits, like the setting itself on fire sort of thing, simply because it's using methalox, and these engines behave differently. But it'd be a unique thing if once we get the 3-core Vulcan Centaur. I think that'll be pretty cool indeed. Friends from Ireland lived with us for 6 months in Atlanta, got addicted to iced tea when they got home. Their friends thought they were crazy. Yeah, iced tea is a completely alien concept to anybody in Britain. It is almost impossible to find iced tea anywhere, sweetened, unsweetened, it doesn't matter. It's just an idea that's completely alien to most British people. So let's see, what do we got here? Let's go ahead and check ULA status again and see if they've done anything new. Oh, okay. Countdown is entering the planned hold at T-minus 4 minutes to sync up with the target launch time of 2:45 Eastern Daylight Time, which is 6:45 UK time. Delta IV Heavy is now fully fueled, not working any technical issues, but watching the winds for the launch of the Delta finale. So right now, you know what? I'm going to go ahead, producer, and send you an image of what what Delta IV Heavy is looking like at this particular moment, because apparently we have a current photograph from the beach. I'm just going to fire this over to you real quick, producer, so you can put it up on the screen. It should be on its way over to you. There you go. So if there's a way for you to post that for the viewers, we've got a view of Delta IV Heavy from the beach. So we'll see. I think this will be very, very, and a very exciting moment indeed coming up here really soon. Boy, I'll tell you. Can't wait. I cannot wait to see this happen. Let's hope that this launch actually transpires. Feel free to ask any questions. We have a relatively small audience compared to what we oftentimes have. So feel free if you have any questions, not only about Delta IV, ULA, whatever, any spaceflight related questions. I'm more than happy to talk to you. Just so you know, my next video, the topic for my next video is going to be India and India's manned spaceflight. Oh, there we go. That was a shot taken just a few minutes ago, apparently, of the Delta IV Heavy out at the Cape. Pretty cool. I can't tell you how excited I would be. No, sorry. So neat. So in any event, I think that how long will I be over in the States? For about a week. I will first stop. My flight will go into New York. From New York, I'll go down to Greenville, South Carolina, where I will see my son perform with his jazz ensemble at Clemson. It is a wonderful coincidence that that particular event is taking place at the same time as the Space Symposium. And then from Greenville, I will fly over to Colorado Springs, and I will stay there until it's about time to head back. And depending on what the rates are on flights and that sort of thing, I may either fly directly back to Heathrow via Denver, or I may go back to New York and fly from there. We shall see. So yes, our last update from ULA is saying everything is looking good. I mean, they're already in the planned hold at T-4 minutes. I mean, they've been proceeding with the countdown. The current launch time is 54 minutes away, and they should be going live in less than half an hour. So we'll see what ends up happening. But very excited about this. Once again, in case you're just joining us, we are about to see spaceflight history in the making. The final launch of the Delta IV Heavy, the third most powerful rocket, operational rocket on the planet in terms of its payload capabilities. Only SLS and Vulcan Heavy have more payload mass. After that, it's the Delta IV Heavy. Delta IV Heavy is even a bit more than the new Vulcan Centaur. So it's quite a rocket, and this will be its swan song. This will be the end. So kind of a sad moment. Deploying a satellite for the National Reconnaissance Office, as it does most of the time. Unfortunately, not a really spectacular mission. But that is what this rocket does most of the time, is it delivers big, heavy satellites into geosynchronous orbit, direct insertion into geosynchronous orbit most of the time is what this rocket's purpose is. Instead of doing the GTO, the geosynchronous transfer orbits, the military doesn't like those as much. They prefer to put their payloads all the way out in geosynchronous orbit right off the bat, then gradually getting them out there. And so in order to do that, you need a rocket with substantial payload capabilities. All the way out to geosynchronous orbit. And Delta IV Heavy is one of the very few that's capable of these kinds of missions. Vulcan Heavy would be another. For most missions, Atlas V can do a lot of them, but not this one. Apparently, this particular satellite is even heavier than most. And also, you have fairing size is an important consideration. The Delta IV Heavy has a very large fairing, or can have a very large fairing anyway. So yeah, a lot of advantages to it, but at the same time, it's a very expensive rocket and totally expendable 3-core rocket. That's, That's something of the past. Could Starship Super Heavy be modified to carry a diameter cluster of SLS solid rocket boosters? Starship can carry more or heavier payloads in space. Maybe, Andrew. I don't know. I mean, that's a question for rocket engineers much more than it would be for me. I mean, it's theoretically, I guess, if you were to put a couple of SRBs onto it, it would carry heavier payloads. But then, you have to find out a way of reusing those SRBs, and maybe you could reuse them in the same way that the shuttle reused them. But unless you have complete reusability, then we are not living up to what Starship is supposed to be. Starship is supposed to be a 100% reusable vehicle, and that is how it revolutionizes the future of spaceflight, is with that characteristic, with that advantage of 100% reusability. All right. So let's see. Once again, we are sitting up. We have another, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and send this over to our producer so you can have a quick look at it. A lot of you have probably seen this diagram before, but it's the diagram of the Delta IV Heavy that's launching today. So I'm going to go ahead and send this over to him so he can show it to us. There we go. And of course, as we know, comprised of 3 boosters, each with only one RS-68A engine. Amazingly, that you have such an incredible payload from a rocket that really only has 3 engines, one in each booster. But these engines are crazy powerful. They are the most powerful hydrogen-oxygen engines, the biggest hydrogen-oxygen engines that have ever been built. And they generate considerably more thrust than even the Raptor 3 and even more than the Raptor 2. So this is how, there we go. There's the Delta IV that's heading up today. Now on the second stage, all you have is an RL-10, but you have a 5-meter payload fairing as well, and a very long fairing at that. So once again, there are certain advantages to this rocket that other rockets simply do not have. But yeah, those engines being as powerful as they are, again, 3 engines, you would think that that's not enough to deliver big payloads, but it absolutely is. These engines generate a tremendous amount of thrust. But yeah, on the upper stage, all you have is RL-10s, very small ones. And there's our launch visibility region. If you have relatively clear weather anyway, this is where you are likely to be able to see Delta IV Heavy ascend once it launches. We have another question from Andrew. Would it be technically possible to add a diameter of a cluster of 7 SLS SRBs around the diameter? Boy, I don't know. I'll tell you, that's a lot of thrust. 7 of those massive solid rocket boosters. And once again, these are not the small scale solid rocket boosters that you have for Vulcan Centaur. Those things are utterly colossal. I don't know if they would rip a ship apart just from the stresses of lifting off with that many of them. I think Starship is probably big enough to handle it, but I would say that it might be a little bit better to look at it like a 3-core. If you want to get that much thrust, a 3-core Starship might actually be better. And by the way, we can't give you volume on this video you're watching right here because unfortunately it's copyright protected music from ULA, sadly. But what he's doing is Tori Bruno's covering the most memorable launches of the Delta IV Heavy. And the two that he covers in this particular video are the launch of the Parker Solar Probe, which I've talked about before. Amazing moment in the history of NASA, deploying this incredible spacecraft that's been able to endure the most hostile region of the solar system I can think of, so close to the sun, and has also achieved velocities faster than any human-made vehicle ever. So it's the fastest human-made vehicle ever built. And the reason for that is because of it's making use of the sun's gravitational pull in order to give it that kind of speed. That's one of the more interesting missions that the Delta IV Heavy has carried out. The other one was launching the Orion spacecraft. And there we go. There we see that characteristic amazing effect, that flame out kind of effect that happens right prior to ignition. Again, it's just part of the process as the hydrogen is pumped into the engines to cool them down right prior to ignition. So yeah, the launch of the Orion was a pretty amazing moment in the history of the Delta IV Heavy. The Orion was tested out to a substantial orbital distance. This was similar to some of the earliest Apollo missions, the ones that didn't go to the moon, but rather was sent out on lengthy orbital trajectories so that they could re-enter the atmosphere at a high velocity, a velocity that would come close to approximating the velocity of a lunar mission, so that it could test the structural integrity of the vehicle, test the heat shield, that sort of thing. And that happened all the way back in 2014. This shows how frustrating this has been, the amount of time that it's taken SLS to move towards maturity. Because back in 2014, we really didn't have a clear idea as to whether or not SpaceX was actually going to achieve 100% or a reusability on their boosters at all. Could a single Raptor engine make it to space? Depends on what it was carrying, but yeah, I think it could. If it was a tiny rocket, sure. I would say that's very possible. What will happen to this launch pad after this? Most probably, this launch pad will be handed over to SpaceX. SpaceX is looking to purchase the use of this launch pad now that ULA no longer has a need for it for their Delta IV Heavies. SpaceX, I think, is going to make use of this launch pad. I don't think the decision has been 100% made on this. We're getting close. By the way, tagged here in the video is the Team Vulcan shirt. That was from the challenge that we had, which, by the way, Vulcan ended up winning when I bet some time ago that Vulcan would make it to space and carry out a successful first mission. At least it was successful. Astrobotic wasn't, but the ULA was. Before Starship could make it to space and carry out a successful re-entry. Well, not a successful re-entry, but at least attempt a re-entry. That was the bet at the time. And Vulcan ended up winning that race, although it was a close one. Could we build an F1 or M1 Hydrolox or Methalox engine using today's modern engines? Good question. I mean, well, the F1... the problem, of course, is, the F1 was not designed to be Hydrolox or Methalox. So, all that would regard some substantial changes. NASA, for a time, was interested in a mass-produced F1. They were thinking about the possibility of building liquid-fueled boosters for upcoming rockets, for the SLS. For example, instead of solid rocket boosters, use liquid-fueled boosters. The idea was to put 2 F1 engines in each booster, which means that you would have 4 F1 engines plus the RS-25s, the 4 RS-25s on SLS. That's a hell of a lot of thrust, actually, a lot of thrust. And they handed that job over to Dynetics. Dynetics researched the hell out of the F1, which was made primary. And F1, for those of you who don't know, is the Apollo engine, the engine that powered the first stage of Starship, or Starship of Saturn V. So in any event, most of the F1 was manufactured with handmade components, and only the technicians who made these components really knew how they worked. Obviously, they left notes and that sort of thing, but still very difficult to interpret. Nevertheless, at least according to the people at Dynetics that I talked to, they said that they were making very good progress on this, and that they were really confident that they would be able to create a mass-produced F1 engine that utilized a lot of lower-cost components, etc., and actually make it into a viable engine for liquid-fueled boosters. And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, NASA canceled the contract. Because after all, if Dynetics had come out with a successful liquid-fueled booster, then all the people who are currently making the solid rocket boosters for SLS now, all at Orbital ATK, they all would have been out of a job. And then all the politicians whose constituents are made up of those people that build those solid rocket boosters, well, those would be some very angry politicians, wouldn't they? And so as a result, the program ended up getting canceled. That's how things used to work at NASA. Fortunately, not as much today compared to the way it used to be, but very, 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 very frustrating indeed. Yes, it is launching from Canaveral, Anton. Just to clarify, we are getting really close. Just so you know, to this. Let's go ahead and check up. Okay, if you're just tuning in, the countdown is proceeding towards a liftoff at 2:45 Eastern Daylight Time. We continue to have a green board with no issues being worked, just waiting on the weather. The launch webcast is going to be getting started in 9 minutes. So 9 minutes, ULA will begin their broadcast, and of course, we'll be sharing that broadcast with you here on the Angry Astronaut. All of this happened a lot. Didn't happen nearly as fast as I was hoping. The original that I would come on only about a half an hour prior to launch and talk to you folks. Instead, I've ended up talking to you for a lot longer than that. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's been interesting for you folks. But yeah, we'll be with you, and the ULA broadcast will be here in just a few minutes. Let's hope everything goes well. Carl Themmel says Robert Heinlein said that humans are going nowhere as long as there are lawyers and accountants. He forgot the lobbyists. Yeah, I would agree with that. The lobbyists make a very big difference. And that's one of NASA's biggest issues. One of the biggest problems that they face is, they are supported by taxpayer dollars, and those taxpayer dollars are approved by elected officials. And those elected officials are not going to be happy if you take jobs out of their states. And then they're going to vote to not give you any money. So yeah, it is beyond frustrating. And one of the reasons why SpaceX has proven to be so successful, because they don't have to worry about any of that crap. Being supported by one of the wealthiest men on the planet, they don't have to worry quite as much about government funding in order to stay operational. So as a result, they can do all in-house development of their boosters, of their technology. Virtually everything is developed in-house by SpaceX. And all of it can be concentrated in the same area. You don't have to worry about diversifying the states, to say, okay, we have to build this in this state to make this congressman happy. We need to build this in this state to make this senator happy, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So let's see here. All right, we are very close. 7 minutes away, something along those lines? Okay, once again, for those of you who may be just joining us, let's go ahead once again and catch up. We have the final launch launch of Delta IV Heavy, the third most powerful operational rocket on the planet in terms of payload capabilities, and the final launch of this particular rocket. Even Vulcan Centaur, which is part of the family of rockets that are going to be replacing it, even that does not have quite the payload capabilities that the Delta IV Heavy does. The only rockets that are currently in service and currently deploying payloads are Falcon Heavy and SLS. Those are the only rockets that are more powerful than this one. So this is, we're definitely losing a heavy hitter, a big gun in the spaceflight industry, but at the same time, for understandable reasons. This rocket there's only so many different types of applications it can be used for that cannot be handled by a less expensive rocket. All right. So, yeah, and it's interesting, given the relatively small number of launches this rocket has had in its history. It does not have a flawless. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to mention is the launch history and launch reliability of ULA as demonstrated by this rocket and the Atlas family. The very first launch, the maiden launch of the Delta IV Heavy, was a partial failure. It didn't get the payload to the appropriate orbit and actually lost some of its payloads as some of its customers as a result. That's the only time that ended up happening, by the way. And that was almost 20 years ago. We have had no other failures this century from either Atlas or Delta rockets, aside from that one failure back in 2004, December of 2004. That is an amazing reliability history. Because 20 years ago, obviously the reliability of rockets wasn't quite up to the standard that it is now. And to have that level of reliability over all this time, there are very, very few companies that can say that. SpaceX definitely has had huge numbers of successful launches. But in its early development history, Falcon 9 did experience a couple of failures right off the bat, one in 2015 and one in 2016. Whereas these, the Delta IV Heavy and the Atlas series had a higher degree of success, at least up to this point. It's pretty impressive. So once again, a reason to respect this. Oh, looks like we're getting ready to go live from ULA. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. We have apparently this is a shot actually from some previous B-roll, I believe, or from the fueling. No, this is a previous launch. So I apologize. This is not ULA's broadcast just yet. I'm just showing you some B-roll from a previous launch. Once again, to reiterate, the most significant launches, in my opinion, of the Delta IV Heavy were the Parker Solar Probe, amazing accomplishment, and the test launch of the Orion capsule in 2014. The first time, actually, that a human-rated spacecraft had gone that far away from the Earth since the Apollo era. It was actually a pretty big launch, and there was a lot of excitement about human spaceflight for the future. And then nothing. For 8 years before we had the launch of SLS finally got off the ground. So kind of disappointing in that regard. But at the same time, Delta IV Heavy did its job at the time, getting Orion out in not only into orbit, but also into a high orbit that allowed it to re-enter at a substantial velocity that came close to approximating the type of velocity that would be experienced by a spacecraft coming back from the moon. And by doing that, they subjected the Orion's structural integrity and its heat shield to an atmospheric reentry similar to what it would go through while it's coming back from the moon. All the way back in 2014, the Orion had proven itself to be a pretty damn good ship. Obviously, there were many things that still needed to be worked on at that point, life support, that sort of thing. But still, as far as the basics were concerned for the Orion, it was operational all the way back then. All right. Apparently, it's like 2 minutes before ULA is going to go live. And once again, we're anticipating a half an hour from the time that we go live with ULA to the launch. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Curiosity was not launched by Delta IV Heavy. I believe Curiosity was launched by an Atlas. I know that it wasn't launched by a Delta IV Heavy. In any event, but yeah, they'll be live here in just a moment, and hopefully we'll have the swan song of one of the most fantastic heavy lift rockets that has ever been built. I certainly think it deserves that title. Sure, it's expendable and wasteful by today's standards. But you have to remember, this is a 20-year-old rocket. 20 years ago, I mean, this was amazing stuff. And the fact that we still have practical uses for it today, that speaks for itself, I think. But let's hope. Let's hope. All right. ULA should be going live here in just a moment. When they do go live, we will bring that to you. Once again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon and on PayPal in order to support my upcoming trip to Space Symposium next month in Colorado Springs. Get an opportunity to interview all the heavy hitters in spaceflight. I'd really love an opportunity to do that. It's such a big event. And a pretty inexpensive one to attend, comparatively speaking. All I have to do is buy the plane ticket. Everything else is taken care of. How many launches for the total for the Delta IV Heavy, including today? 16. Not very many. It's not a rocket that's been launched a hell of a lot, and again, that says something about the marketplace for it. It's it kind of demonstrates how limited the market is for these kinds of heavy lift rockets. You also may have noticed that we haven't had a whole lot of Falcon Heavies launch either. I mean, Falcon 9s launch all the time. Oh, here we go. Okay, we can't. We've got copywritten music coming currently, but soon we'll probably have some commentators from ULA, so we'll bring that to you. So as of right now, they're just talking about the basics behind that. Here we go. Please do.
Engineering leader at ULA and your host for today's live broadcast of the final Delta Heavy, carrying NROL-70 for the National Reconnaissance Office. I'm here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where liftoff is currently scheduled for 2:45 p.m. Eastern. In addition to watching our webcast, you can also follow live mission progress at ulalaunch.com. The count is currently in a planned hold. We have 2 planned holds in our launch count, which give our team time to resolve any issues prior to entering the terminal count. At this time, the team is not working any issues, and we're proceeding towards an on-time liftoff. Live mission coverage will continue through payload fairing jettison, which occurs approximately 6.5 hours after liftoff. To tell us more about today's mission customer, let's go to ULA's Ben Chilton over at the Friends and Family viewing area on the NASA Causeway.
Thanks, Andrea. I'm Ben Chilton, an ordnance engineer at ULA, and I'm joining you from the NASA Causeway, just a few miles south of Space Launch Complex 37. Today's launch is for the National Reconnaissance Office, or NRO. The NRO is the leader in developing, acquiring, launching, and operating the nation's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites to secure and expand America's advantage in space. The NROL-70 mission will strengthen the NRO's ability to provide a wide range of timely intelligence information to national decision makers, warfighters, and intelligence analysts to protect the nation's vital interests and support humanitarian efforts worldwide. Back to you, Andrea.
This is the 16th and final flight of the Delta IV Heavy rocket and ULA's 160th launch. Here's more about this heavy lift rocket.
Yeah, we got more copyrighted music. I wish I could answer your question about M1. That's I'm afraid I've got a gap in my knowledge on that one. So I'll have to research that for you. So got a couple of things to work on here, a little bit of homework. But you know what? That's what's great about these live streams. That's what's great about these opportunities for the viewers to tell me about some topics that they haven't seen on my channel yet, so I can bring that information to them. My next video is going to be about the Indian space program, about their human-rated program that's coming up here really soon. They will be doing an unmanned launch of their human-rated spacecraft in July. And there will be 3 unmanned tests, and the first Indian astronauts, launched by India anyway, are going to be heading up to orbit next year. Producer, we still got music? Okay. So once again, guys, we can't bring you this this audio, unfortunately, because of copyright restrictions. Will NASA definitely be building SLS Block 2 cargo? Well, we can never say definitely with NASA. You know, it's hard to say that for sure. The Block 2 cargo is the heaviest lift SLS around. You know, is it going to be necessary with Starship? You know, if Starship is operational, if Starship is an operational vehicle, I would say probably not. I don't see a purpose for SLS cargo, Block 2 cargo. I do still see a purpose for human-rated SLS carrying out human-rated missions in the Block 2 format, because the Block 2 with the universal stage adapter can actually carry a substantial amount of payload in addition to the Orion and the astronauts. It can carry a lot of extra cargo, perhaps if we were to go with a lander like the Dynetics Alpaca, the SLS Block 2, actually the SLS Block 1B, could carry Alpaca plus Orion all the way to the Moon 1 launch. Let's go back to ULA at this point.
Today's flight is dedicated in memory of colleagues who are no longer with us. Let's remember our teammates.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, these guys keep playing games with us. So as we can see, going to be dedicated apparently to colleagues and friends who have been lost. I don't know. I would assume these are folks who have died of natural causes. One of the most moving things that I've seen was at Space Park in Titusville. They actually have a memorial to everybody who has died while working for NASA, working out at the Cape. It's a dangerous job doing what people do out there. And so it has a list of all of the contractors, all of the personnel who have died on the job from a variety of different accidents and such. And, you know, those folks deserve recognition in the same way that astronauts do. So in any event, they're relating to us the information on these folks that ULA has lost recently. And apparently this rocket is dedicated in the memory of these folks that ULA has lost recently, which is it's an admirable thing to do. Definitely. Once again, checking on the status of Delta IV Heavy, seeing if anything has changed. Let's see. Launch Weather Officer Mark Berger reports that the current and forecast conditions are close to the threshold for acceptable criteria for the Delta IV Heavy liftoff of NROL-70. The team will continue to monitor the winds. So the good news is no technical problems, none as far as we can tell. But bad news is it's the winds are iffy. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing you some information about India. It's not just that, by the way. They have a sample return mission currently underway that they're going to be launching here soon to the moon to follow up the Chandrayaan missions. Here we go. Let's go ahead and bring ULA back.
Roger. Minus 21 minutes.
Fuel 2, perform second stage LH2 fuel and drain valve cycle test.
Roger.
LOX 2, perform second stage LOX fuel and drain valve cycle test.
Roger.
Everything's still going very smoothly with this pre-launch preparation. Technically,
Since 1960, Delta rockets have been an integral part of America's space program. The on-orbit assets it has launched have improved life across the globe. Let's take a look.
Oh dear, here we go again. These guys just love their music, don't they? Yeah, they know that this is being rebroadcasted by lots of people. I almost feel like they're doing this on purpose. Yeah. That's a very good point. If I didn't have this awesome producer working for me, Mr. ASN up in Yorkshire, they could catch me at a moment like this during these broadcasts. And if any of this music came in, ULA would be able to grab all the monetization revenue from this broadcast. So it's good to have a producer. So right now, of course, as you could probably see, they're talking about the Delta family of launch vehicles. One of the most spectacular failures of a launch vehicle was the Delta. Took place in the late 1990s. The explosion was an airburst, and it was so violent that it rained burning debris down on the parking lot, damaged quite a number of vehicles. Again, giving you an indication of just how destructive an airburst RUD can be on a big rocket. And of course, the Delta that airbursted is approximately 1/10 of the power that a Starship would have if it airbursted. Go ahead and bring back ULA, please.
The Delta program has been an important part of many of our employees' careers. We recently spoke with employees about what the Delta rocket has meant to them.
Yeah, I'll tell you, these people, they love their music. So right now we're getting employee testimonials and that sort of thing. And just so you know, I've read a lot of employee reviews from ULA, and actually it's a popular place to work. Apparently lots of benefits. Apparently they don't work people to death in the same way that they do at SpaceX. You could argue that because of that, they don't accomplish as much as SpaceX does. But nevertheless, the working environment is more manageable. Trustpire brings up a good point, like a small nuke. Yeah, that's what a Starship RUD would be like, especially if it airbursted. It would be similar to a tactical nuclear blast. Let's just hope that never happens. That's an RUD I wouldn't like to see. I think that would be very frightening, to say the least. And that's like I say, it's scary would probably be one of the many consequences of something like that. But thus far, Starship seems to fly very well, at least in terms of going off the pad. There doesn't seem to have been very many problems at all, except for the destruction of the launch pad on the first attempt. But the introduction of those of the water cooled systems and all that seem to have solved a lot of those issues. Yes, good point, Paul. The N1 explosion was similar to a tactical nuclear blast. And the N1 arguably is only about 60% of what Starship could be. So, yeah. Nasty stuff. Let's just hope that doesn't happen. Yeah, instead of saying let's go visit Starbase, let's go visit this crater in Texas, according to my producer. And that's probably what it would be for a while. It'd probably be a pretty well, an airburst. I don't know how big of a crater it would create versus debris and just devastation over a pretty wide area. Let's just hope it doesn't happen. Yeah, I mean, well, any nuclear explosion or any explosion that airburst causes devastation over a wider area. It doesn't dig a deep crater usually. I mean, to give you an example of the difference between airburst and impact, the Meteor Crater, Arizona, shows what an impact does. It digs a deep crater, big explosion, but doesn't damage things over as wide of an area. The Tunguska event, on the other hand, in Siberia, that did airburst, probably because it was a comet or a cometary fragment rather than an asteroid. And so when the Tunguska event happened, the airburst spread devastation over a huge area, but no real crater to speak of. When Korolev sitting on a chair when N1 went kaput. I think Korolev wasn't he dead by then? I thought it was a replacement. Let's bring ULA back, and let's hope they don't drag us to more copyrighted music.
Minus 14 minutes. As gas, establish scan pattern 140. Roger. VSE, verify base bending moment. Instrumentation is active and data is valid.
BBM is fully mission capable. Recommend placard 6 Alpha for launch.
Roger. OS, set BBM active.
Roger.
We are currently about 12 and a half minutes away from liftoff.
With this launch, we are also remembering an NRO teammate. Here is Mission Director Colonel Eric Zaribaninski.
Maybe not. Yeah. Looks like they may have lost their producer over at ULA. Looks like they can't switch here we go.
This is the MD. This afternoon's NROL-70 launch is dedicated to the memory of Colonel Edward Chip Zakrzewski. Chip dedicated his career to the advancement of space launch and to the success of NRO missions. He was a fierce advocate and leader for the Office of Space Launch and in the broader space launch community. Chip was the OSL director for the first Delta IV Heavy launch, so it is only fitting that the last Delta IV Heavy launch is dedicated to him. To our leader, mentor, and friend, Godspeed, Chip. MD out.
All right.
Minus 12 minutes.
MEQ, initiate retract data logger just prior to the L7 pole.
Roger.
Less than 12 minutes now, guys. The final launch of the Delta IV Heavy.
After liftoff, the Delta IV Heavy will head east from Space Launch Complex 37. Here's a look at today's ascent.
Oh dear. Here we go with more music. Okay. I may be able to narrate this process for you guys as ULA relates it. So once again, that characteristic flame is produced from excess hydrogen being burned off at the last moment prior to ignition. And then there she goes. There are only 3 engines pushing up this colossal rocket, again indicating just how big these suckers are. So obviously we're going with the rocket goes through maximum dynamic pressure shortly after reaching supersonic velocities. And then the port and starboard boosters are ejected. The core booster, of course, remaining and continuing to provide thrust. And then once the core booster's gone, it's going to drop away as well. And at this stage, if I remember correctly, right, so we have RL-10 engines obviously in the upper stage. At this point, if I remember correctly, this part of the rocket only weighs about 6%. The rocket has shed 94% of its total mass by the time the second stage ignites. Just to give you an idea of how much propellant and oxidizer there is just to get the thing up into orbit.
ULA friends and family excited to witness the last liftoff of this magnificent rocket. I'm approximately 3 miles from Slick 37, and when we reach T0, it will take about 15 seconds for the sound to reach us, though we'll already have seen Delta lift off the pad. From where I'm standing, it's a little windy at the moment, but I'll pass it off to Space Launch Delta 45 Weather Officer Arlena Moses for today's weather forecast.
Thanks, Ben. As you mentioned, it is a little breezy out there this afternoon, and that's going to be our main weather watch item for our launch today. If you were out earlier, you did notice that we had some showers kind of pushed through about an hour or so ago. Those are well to the south. Don't expect any more showers or concerns with that. So our main concern will be our breezy conditions coming from the northwest as we see behind kind of the showers in front that pushed through earlier. Currently across the area, we're seeing gusts into the 20s. And if we look at the forecast going forward to our current T0 today, we are looking at a probability of seeing weather violations of 70%, with our main concern being those ground winds, as we can see here with some of our gusts across the area. But we are looking at sustained winds ticking up just a bit here over the next few minutes, kind of coming up into that 20 to 30 knot range. So continuing out of the northwest, temperature is about 72 degrees, and hopefully we'll be able to keep those winds down just enough that we'll be able to see the launch of our Delta IV Heavy this afternoon. Back to you, Andrea.
We remain in the planned hold as we continue towards liftoff. In a few moments, launch conductor Scott Barney will pull the launch team for the final go to pick up the count. 28 engineers and managers are pulled for system status and readiness to proceed. This is the final status check for all Delta vehicle systems, ground systems, spacecraft, and the U.S. Space Force Eastern Range. The vehicle system readiness pull includes electrical systems, hydraulics, pneumatics, propulsion systems, and flight control, and propellants. Let's listen in as Scott Barney performs the final pulling.
Final poll coming up, guys.
-7 minutes. Status check to proceed with terminal count. First stage systems, propulsion. Go. Hydraulics.
Go.
Locks.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Second stage system, locks.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Electrical systems airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
COM.
Go.
GCQ.
Go.
Operation support.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
HAZGAS.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Radar monitor.
Go.
Mechanical engineering. Go. Quality.
Go.
Ops safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
Launch vehicle.
Here we go, guys. We are go for launch.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC. Verify T0 is set for 18:45:00.
6 minutes, guys.
Verified.
6 minutes before the swan
MEQ,
song
establish swing on
of
lock
Delta
pins,
IV
pull.
Heavy.
Active.
Here we go, folks.
Polling is complete and the team is go for launch. From T-minus 4 minutes until liftoff, you'll hear Scott Barney and the team performing the final steps in the countdown procedure. Several critical activities occur in the final minutes before launch, including verifying fuel tank levels and pressures in the 3 boosters and the DCSS, in addition to arming the flight termination system. At T-minus 1 minute, the Range Operations Commander confirms the range is in a green condition for launch. At T-minus 15 seconds, the launch table HBOs at the base of the rocket are ignited to burn off excess hydrogen. At T-minus 7 seconds, the starboard engine is ignited. At T-minus 5 seconds, the port and center engines are ignited. Once the Delta IV Heavy lifts off, you'll hear flight commentator Rob Gannon providing launch vehicle ascent data.
Approximately 5 minutes. Near as we can tell, the weather's held up well enough to accommodate this launch. Always just get so excited at these moments.
This is Delta Mission Control at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. We anticipate releasing the hold in just a few moments.
Guys, T-minus 4 minutes. Let's see what happens. See if they release the hold.
T-minus 4 minutes.
It's released. We're going.
Hold, hold, hold. This is flight control. We have a CCLS red line fault at T-minus 3 minutes.
We have a fault.
58 seconds.
We have a
LC
fault.
switch not ready. All personnel go to recycle steps for Operation 90.
Let's see how serious this is.
LC switch is not ready.
Flight control is ready to set clock to T-minus 4 and holding.
Roger. ALC, reset countdown clock to T-minus 4 minutes and
We're
holding.
back in a 4-minute hold, guys. Not sure what this technical issue is, but something came up.
LC flight control, SS BAP inactive and SCS in pre-flight mode.
Roger. And properly evaluate LOX recycle and report if ready to restart.
Roger. Red line that we've.
OSM, place the SRM ignition switch to disable position.
SRM ignition disabled.
ALC, count. Disregard.
LC countdown clock has been reset to T-minus 4 and holding.
Roger. For step 90, all stations recycle systems back, T-minus 4 holding in configuration. Recycle occurred at T-minus 3 minutes, 58 seconds. Report status at completion.
We only got 2 seconds into that final 4-minute countdown before something popped up.
LC fuel 1.
Go fuel 1.
Substep golf. CBC LH2 inerting is active. Excuse me. LH2 conditioning is active.
Roger.
LC FTS.
Go.
Substat Juliet FTS safe and external.
Roger.
LC locks 2.
Go.
Second stage LO2 conditioning active.
Roger.
LC locks 1.
Go.
CBC locks conditioning active.
Roger.
LC ECS.
Go.
ECS set point stable.
Roger.
LC fuel 2.
Go.
Second stage LH2 conditioning active.
Roger.
LC SYS.
Go.
GC3 ready.
Roger. LC has gas. Go. Step Foxtrot has gas ready. And as MEQ, should I reinstall lock pins?
Yes, let's install pins.
Roger.
LC AV.
Go.
For substep Papa, vehicle external.
Roger.
LC Prep 101.
Go.
All systems are stable.
Roger.
LC flight control.
Go flight control.
Step 180, sub-step kilo, flight control ready.
Roger. LC MEQ. Go. Substep Oscar, TSM and swing arm systems ready. Roger.
And substep alpha, pneumatic pressures stable.
Roger.
So what we're getting at this point is just is the various folks responsible for different parts of the rocket and ground systems, et cetera, are just updating to say that everything's looking good for a launch at from where they're sitting. But we still have this fault, and we're waiting to see what the circumstances are with this fault before anything further can happen.
Go.
But up to right now, the rocket is still ready to go.
Roger.
This is Delta Mission Control at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. The planned hold has been extended. We will pass on more information as it becomes available.
They're detanking. We're done. We're done, guys, unfortunately.
And LD, just to confirm, we're in a
we're scrubbed
for a 24-hour turnaround.
It's going to be 24 hours before we can try to address this issue again. Once again, guys, very sorry that this came up, and it's very possible that I am not going to be able to cover this the next time around because my producer is has a big family thing coming up this weekend, so we want to wish him well, obviously, and I cannot cover these things without him. If it's a 24-hour turnaround, we may be able to do this. It's hard to say. So once again, I will of course keep you guys up to date on where we're sitting, and whether or not I'm going to be able to provide coverage. If it is 24 hours from now, then I may still be able to do it. Disappointing, but at the same time, we have to consider the customer here. This is a national reconnaissance mission that these guys pay insane amounts of money to ULA. ULA would not be able to survive without U.S. military budgetary support. And so they don't want to take the slightest chance at all of something going wrong with this. There's no roll in the dice with this. If there's anything looking off, then they need to do a troubleshooting investigation of the rocket. I, of course, will bring you updates on all of that on Twitter and also on my Discord server, letting you guys know what's been transpiring with it. Very disappointing that these things happen, but at the same time, for all of us who watch rockets, spend our time watching liftoffs, well, we know that this is what happens. So in any event, all the best to ULA in getting this problem taken care of. Thank you very much for joining us. Once again, please like, please subscribe, consider supporting my upcoming trip to the Space Symposium. And as always, stay angry about space.